We begin this hour with new developments in the Liberal leadership race. Two of the anticipated candidates for the job said today they won't be running, while two others are hinting they're about to throw their hats in the ring. CBC's Karina Gould joins me live from Ottawa. This is the busiest leadership race I think we've ever seen, because it's so short, and so we've just got new names. You know, it seems almost every hour, or twice a day. What is the latest on the race to replace Justin Trudeau?
I'm going to say it's a bit more than twice a day, I feel. Yeah. Yes, so we know that François-Philippe Champagne is not running. He will not enter the race. He made the announcement just in the last hour or so at the Canadian Club in front of business leaders. He was doing a fireside chat there, and that's where the question came up, and he answered it quite honestly. So let's have a listen to how he answered that question.
I thought very carefully about that period. And I come to the conclusion that I will not be seeking to be the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada for the upcoming race. I will dedicate my energy to defend Canada, to defend Canadians, to defend Canadian businesses. It was probably one of the most difficult decisions in my life, but I think it's the right one at the right time.
Now, supporters did see him as a really strong contender. He's well respected by people on sort of all sides of the political spectrum. I mean, there's lots of premiers who really like him, including Conservative premiers, for example. But he says there's other ways to fight for Canada other than entering the Liberal leadership race. And so that's what he's going to do, at least for now, in this race. The other person who says they're out is Christy Clark, the former BC Premier, also someone who most people thought was really serious about running, and perhaps she was, but she ran into some controversy about a past membership in the Conservative Party, however brief that membership was, because it had to do with support for Jean Charest as in his leadership bid for the Conservative Party. But that seemed to turn the tide in favor of not running, although that's not what she used as a reason in her statement, and well, in her email that she sent to supporters today. So I'll read a bit of that statement to you. While we have come a long way in a short time, there is simply not enough time to mount a successful campaign, and for me to effectively connect with Francophone Canadians in their language. I have worked hard at improving my French, but it's not where it needs to be today. And then she went on in that email to also sort of pinpoint the fact that the timing of the Prime Minister's resignation really doesn't give a lot of time for candidates like herself, but also for the party to renew and grow, although she still has hopes that it will do both. Now, sources tell us that Chrystia Freeland, another name that has been much talked about on this front, will be throwing her hat in the ring before the 20th, so before U.S. Inauguration Day. And that's because who would really want to compete with that day in terms of getting attention for an announcement? And Jonathan Wilkinson, the Natural Resources Minister, still, as we know it, pondering going forward. He hasn't said that he is not, but he also hasn't officially announced. And he's in Washington the next 2 days as part of the Team Canada offensive in terms of trying to ward off tariffs from Trump. So he's clearly at this point focusing on his current job. And I should mention that there's also been an announcement of a cabinet retreat on Inauguration Day and the day after that, that the Prime Minister will hold on the other side of the river, on the Outaouais, for cabinet ministers to discuss specifically how to deal with the threat of tariffs and the Canada-U.S. relationship as a whole.
And a couple of other potential candidates are still being a little coy about their plans, but sure sounds like they're in. Tell us about them.
Yeah, I mean, coy is, I guess, the polite way of saying that. I think that we're past that point in a way. Karina Gould had a funding announcement today in her riding for freshwater conservation, and at that announcement took the opportunity to slam Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, saying, if they form government, this kind of funding won't happen. In fact, it'll be slashed. It'll impact our drinking water. And so using the opportunity for that, however, that's not what the questions were about. As soon as she took reporters' questions, of course, it was about her potential leadership bid. And so here's an exchange on that front.
If you run for leadership, you would be the youngest candidate in the Liberal leadership race and the only one under 40. Would you consider this an advantage or a disadvantage?
Well, I will have more to say in the coming days, but I think it is extremely important that we have a younger voice in the race who can relate to people where they are and the struggles that they're facing today.
If you run, can we assume that you are ready to commit the next 6 to 8 years of your life, either as the Prime Minister or as the person rebuilding the Liberal Party, should it come to that this spring?
I think anyone who puts their name forward should be committing to that.
So some interesting comments from her on what candidates should be ready to do if they win the leadership, win the position of Prime Minister, at least until an election. And then what if the Liberal Party doesn't do so well in the next election, as polls indicate might be their future? Would that leader stick around to rebuild the party? And then there's Mark Carney. So I think this is where we would say maybe beyond the coyness, because it was almost like a soft launch of his campaign on American television last night on The Daily Show. Many Canadians watched that show, even though it's an American show. And, basically he did everything but declare. So have a listen.
A wild hypothetical. Let's say the candidate wasn't part of the government. Let's say the candidate did have a lot of economic experience. Let's say the candidate did deal with crises. Let's say the candidate had a plan to deal with the challenges in the here and now.
Sneaky, you're running as an outsider.
I am an outsider.
Now, Conservatives hitting back at that characterization of him as an outsider, saying he's anything but an outsider. In fact, he was on Trudeau's economic growth task force. And so they're saying that this scripted performance, they basically dissed it in many different ways in a statement and in social media posts. But sources say, regardless of what criticism he might be facing for that appearance or applause for those who liked it, he is expected to officially launch on Thursday.
All right, Karina, thank you. CBC's Karina Roman, live in Ottawa. So let's stay on the story and bring in Catherine Loiacono. She is a senior director for the public affairs firm Tact Conseil, and she also served as director of operations and parliamentary affairs for the Liberal government in 2018. And Catherine, appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
great to be here.
François-Philippe Champagne's decision, he's out. Did that surprise you?
I don't think it really surprised a lot of Liberals, although I think there was a bit of an expectation that he would throw his name in the ring. I think François-Philippe Champagne's been a very effective minister. He's quite charismatic, and he brings a lot of energy to the race. But, like many of the other candidates, I think there's more candidates saying no, thank you right now than tossing their names in the ring. And so he's probably looking at the rules to get into the race, the short period of time. And he's also looking at, is this the right time for him? I mean, Minister Champagne's never been shy about his intention to want the top job. So, it's we lose another Quebec voice in the Liberal Party race right now.
Could this be an indication that? What do you think it's an indication of? Do you think that it would be just too tough for maybe François-Philippe Champagne against, say, Chrystia Freeland, Mark Carney?
Well, I think that François-Philippe Champagne brings a lot of experience to the table. I think that he has been a strong voice for Quebec, and I think that's an important voice that we're now missing. So I think I think he would have been a great candidate alongside Chrystia Freeland if she decides to run, and Mark Carney if he decides to run as well.
What do you make, and these are the reasons that that Mélanie Joly, Dominique LeBlanc, and now François-Philippe Champagne, top ministers, have given. They've said, listen, this is a pretty critical moment. The threats coming from Donald Trump, that they've got big day jobs that they got to focus on, and that really needs to be where they are. They can't be in a leadership campaign. What do you make of that rationale?
Well, I think that there's very genuine. I think that we're at a place now where we need all hands on deck, where we really need to work with the incoming administration in the U.S. And so I think that's all that they're doing their public service. I also think that they're also looking at the polls and looking at the leadership race and rules, and they've had some time to seriously reflect if this is the right time for them to go.
So Christy Clark also announcing this morning that she's not going to run. You know, you've seen her statement. Do you think why do you think she decided not to run? Do you think it's that, you know, her French is just not quite good enough, there's not enough time, or do you think there is an issue around, you know, she says she misspoke when she said that she wasn't a member of the Conservative Party, and then she had to say, okay, you know, I made a mistake.
Well, I think individually, each of those factors she could have overcome. But I think the combination of all three of those pieces, I think, probably made her rethink whether or not she wanted to toss her name in the ring. I think Christy Clark is a great campaigner. She's a great organizer. She's from Western Canada. She's a former premier, so she has experience. So I think we lose a little bit of a Western voice as well. We'll see if Jonathan Wilkinson tosses his name in the ring.
Mark Carney, he was on, as we were mentioning, on The Daily Show last night. This was our first chance to hear from him directly, where he he basically said that he's running. I don't think he came pretty close to kind of confirming it. Do you think he can credibly run as an outsider, as he said? And what did you think of what you heard from Mark Carney last night?
Well, look, I think for the first time we get to see Mark Carney reveal himself to Canadians and Americans last night in a lighter way, to show a different side of himself. So in that sense, I think it was great for people to see him and for Liberals to see him. But I think he really does need to speak to Liberal supporters, to Canadians, and to Canadian journalists as well, if he wants to resonate and get his message across to Canadians. So, I think that if he does decide to run, we're looking at a bit of a two-way race right now with Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland. I think he can. If we say that, if we define an outsider as someone who hasn't sat in government, then Mark Carney can genuinely say that he's an outsider because he has not sat as an MP or in cabinet and sat for government. So, in that sense, he's able to cherry pick the policies that that are popular, and then distance themselves from other policies that have not been so popular, like the carbon tax or the capital gains tax. Whereas I think Chrystia Freeland has a bit of a harder hill to climb when she will have to defend and say why she would or would not want why she would or want to change her position on certain policies.
Catherine, thank you. Catherine Loiacono of TAC Conseil in Montreal.